To the control of blood pressure, you know, the blood pressure is controlled in many different ways. The blood pressure in the body is controlled by many different ways, like hormonal control is there, baroreceptor control is there, chemoreceptor control is there, then neural response control is there. Okay, there are different ways how the blood pressure is controlled. The pressure of the blood has to be always maintained at a normal level. Okay, it should not reduce below the normal required level, that is called hypotension. It should not go above the required level, which we call it as hypertension. Okay, both hypotension as well as hypertension is dangerous. Hypotension, when there is severe blood loss, then the patient can develop hypotension. Or if there is profuse sweating, the patient can develop hypotension. Or if the patient is having vomiting, continuous vomiting and diarrhea for more than 10 to 15 times, then the patient can develop hypotension. Okay, so likewise there are many reasons for hypotension, and for hypertension also there are many reasons. For example, it may be genetic. Okay, the family genes will carry the defective gene with hypertension, and high cholesterol level can increase the hypertension. Then increased peripheral resistance can develop hypertension. Then systemic organ failure. For example, if kidney is failed, then it cannot filter the urine. Okay, so in that case, there are the more blood volume will stay in the blood, and the hypertension will develop. Okay, so there are many reasons for hypo and hypertension. So now we will see how this is controlled. That's what you have to understand. Okay, one is it is having the nervous system is controlling, as well as the hormone like thyroxine or adrenalocorticotropic hormone, antidiuretic hormone, all these are controlling the blood pressure. Okay, so after peripheral resistance, even the peripheral resistance, for example, sudden exposure of a person to cold can increase peripheral vasoconstriction. That's what we call the peripheral resistance, and thereby in the great vessels the blood pressure will increase. So alter peripheral resistance for two main purposes. One is maintain the mean arterial pressure throughout the body and route blood flow wherever needed. So for example, what is the routing blood flow wherever needed? For example, if a person is having operation in the stomach, okay, so the abdomen, more blood is lost, you have to you have to tilt the patient towards the leg side, so that the leg goes up, so all the blood in the leg will flow towards the brain. Okay, so what you understand by this, we are routing the blood flow. Okay, in the operation theatre, this is the thing that is done by anesthesiologist. We are routing the blood flow because the heart and brain should always be supplied with a good amount of blood flow. Okay, so what happens whenever there is any severe perspiration, like severe sweating, the heart rate increases in order to supply adequate blood to the brain. Okay, so that time if you see, all the skin, blood vessels, everything will shrink, and you cannot see any enlarged veins. Okay, so that's what we call it, a routing blood flow towards the center. Then the heart is controlled by heart rate. The blood pressure also depends on the number of heartbeat, that is regulated by the baroreceptor reflex. What is baroreceptor? Like, it is a pressure receptor. Okay, the volume of the blood is sensed by the baroreceptor cells present in the arch of aorta and also in the carotid body. The carotid artery body also, there is baroreceptor cells. These baroreceptor cells will sense the blood pressure, and it will send it to the brain, and brain will control the speed of the heartbeat. Okay, then chemoreceptors reflex. For example, if there is more sodium, then the chemoreceptor cells in the hypothalamus will detect it, and it will order the kidney to filter more amount of urine where the excess amount of sodium is washed out. Okay, so how the homeostatic balance blood pressure is maintained in the normal limit. For example, if the blood pressure is high, what happens? The blood pressure is having baroreceptor cells. This will tell the brain that the blood pressure is high. So immediately what happens? The brain will stimulate the parasympathetic nerve, vagus nerve, and it will reduce the heartbeat. The vagus nerve is reducing the heartbeat and also increase the diameter of the blood vessels so that normal blood pressure is maintained. Whereas if the patient had some accident or any surgery or severe vomiting, diarrhea, then the blood pressure is low and blood volume is low. That time what happens? The baroreceptor cells will on the vessel wall, blood vessel wall will sense it and order the brain. Brain will stimulate the sympathetic nerve and then it will increase the heartbeat and also it will cause peripheral vasoconstriction. All the blood vessels in the periphery will go in for constriction and the normal blood pressure is maintained. So this is how the homeostatic balance is done between high blood pressure and the low blood pressure. Okay, then control of blood pressure is done by the hormonal control and the neural control. Okay, what is the hormonal control? For example, adrenal medulla, that is secreting the epinephrine and norepinephrine, will increase the sympathetic nerve supply and increase the heartbeat. Thereby the cardiac output will be increased. Okay, then angiotensin 2, it is a vasoconstriction and release aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone. This angiotensin 2 is produced in the kidney and that will cause vasoconstrictions, and also this will release the aldosterone from the adrenal cortex and the antidiuretic hormone in the this brain, then the pituitary gland, that is a vasopressin. Okay, then the heart itself, it releases atrial natriuretic peptide, ANP. It's a hormone which will act against the adrenal cortex hormone, the aldosterone hormone. Okay, then antidiuretic hormone means it is a vasopressin, it produces the posterior pituitary. So this hormone will decrease the urine output. Okay, diuretic hormone means, for example, furosemide is a drug which we call it as diuretics. Okay, so what happens? This diuretic drug, when you give, it increases the urine output, thereby the blood pressure will reduce. So suppose, for example, if a person is having high BP and you want to reduce blood pressure, so what happens? You tell the kidney to filter more urine by giving furosemide, the diuretic drug. Okay, so suppose if the blood pressure is low, okay, so that time the kidney cannot be filtering the urine, so the antidiuretic hormone secreted by posterior pituitary will act on the kidney and it will stop the kidney filtering more amount of urine. Okay, this is how the diuretic drug is used in the clinical aspect. Okay, suppose if there is more pulmonary congestion, so what we do, we give diuretic drug and we will reduce the blood volume so that the congestion in the lung will, congestion, accumulation of fluid, that will reduce in the lungs. Okay, then in long-term regulation, the renal kidney is placing a major role. One is the direct renal mechanism and indirect renal mechanism. Direct renal mechanism, what happens? The blood volume independently of hormones, the blood volume is maintained by the kidney directly. Okay, the kidney will sense it, and if there is more blood volume, the more amount of urine will be released. Okay, then indirect mechanism is by renin-angiotensin mechanism. That is the one hormonal mechanism where the kidney is able to regulate the blood volume. Okay, so this is what it is mentioned here. Arterial pressure increases, the kidney will, if the pressure in the blood increases, the kidney will filter urine, more amount of urine will be formed, blood volume will reduce, and the mean arterial pressure will be maintained in the balance. Okay, normal level. Whereas in the indirect mechanism, when there is decrease in arterial pressure, what happens? It inhibits the baroreceptor cells will stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, and thereby the renin is released in the kidney. Okay, so this renin will convert the angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and then this angiotensin 1 will be converted into angiotensin 2. Okay, this will act on the adrenal cortex, and aldosterone is secreted, and then the sodium reabsorption is taking place, then water reabsorption is also taking place, and water intake also by the mouth is done. By oral route you drink more water, and blood volume is maintained. Okay, and thereby normal pressure is maintained. So this is how the indirect mechanism that is taking place in the kidney to control the blood pressure. Okay, so the blood pressure cycle over a 24 period. BP peaks in the morning due to level of hormones. Then BP is always little bit high in the early morning time. It also depends on the age, sex, weight, race, mood, and posture may vary the blood pressure. Okay, the position, in lying position there will be one blood pressure, and in standing position there will be one blood pressure. So hypertension is nothing but increased blood pressure. Hypertension is nothing but increased blood pressure. There is primary or essential hypertension. 90% of the hypertensive patients are having essential or primary hypertension. Okay, so this is due to hereditary factor, diet, obesity, increased age, more amount of stress, then diabetes mellitus, and smoking. These are all the causes for primary hypertension. Okay, hereditary, for example, if your parents or grandparents having blood pressure, you are prone to get this blood pressure, high blood pressure, because it is carried in genes. Okay, your genetic code in the cell, genes in the cell. So likewise, secondary hypertension is due to failure of vital organs like kidney failure, or atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, or endocrine disorders like hyperthyroidism or Cushing's syndrome. So these are all the causes of secondary hypertension. For example, if you found the patient is having secondary hypertension due to kidney damage, you have to make sure that you, in hemodialysis, you release more amount of blood fluid, I mean urine fluid. Okay, so likewise, you first of all you have to find out whether the patient is having primary hypertension or secondary hypertension. Based on that only you can plan the treatment, in fact. Okay, orthostatic hypertension is the sudden reduction in the BP from changing from one position, sitting to reclining position. Okay, so when a patient is in sitting and he is going for lying down position, reclining position, suddenly his BP will go down. So that is called as orthostatic hypotension. Then chronic hypotension is sudden reduction in blood pressure, may be due to Addison's disease or hypothyroidism. These are all these things can happen in hormonal disturbance. Okay, then acute hypotension is a circulatory shock where there is low amount of sudden drop of blood pressure. Okay, so the circulatory shock it's of three types. One is hypovolemic shock. For example, if the patient is having severe vomiting, or in the vomiting potassium loss is also present. Okay, even the patient can be suffering from hypokalemia also. Okay, then diarrhea, if there is more water is stooled for more than 10 to 15 times, then the blood volume also start to reduce. So these kind of patients, they become dehydrated. So whenever patient comes to ER, emergency room, and you just hold the skin and see, when they say that the patient is having a loose motion, vomiting and diarrhea, then what you have to do, you have to check their tongue to see if there is any hydration. If it is dry, the patient is dehydrated. Then catch the skin. If you pinch the skin, the wrinkles will not relieve. It will be like wrinkles will be present. Okay, so these are all the signs of hypovolemia. Okay, these are all the signs of hypovolemia. Then vascular shock. This is due to extreme vasodilatation, like we call it as anaphylactic shock. This anaphylactic shock can occur in sudden allergic reactions or sunstroke. Okay, so these are all the time where the anaphylactic shock can come. This is called as it is due to extreme vasodilation, and the brain will not receive an enormous amount of blood supply, and they faint. Okay, this is called as vascular shock. Okay, then there is a cardiogenic shock, which is due to pumping failure of the heart due to myocardial injury or any myocardial rupture, whatever it is. So we call that as cardiogenic shock. Okay, so now you have to understand about the blood flow through tissues. You have to understand about the blood flow through tissues. You have to understand about the blood flow through tissues. So blood flow tissues is involved in delivery of oxygen and nutrients and removal of waste from the tissue cells, then exchange of gases, absorption of nutrients, and urine formation. Okay, so whenever the blood is flowing through the tissue, what happens, this kind of incidence is taking place. One is oxygen is delivered and carbon dioxide is picked, then the hormone is delivered and the carbohydrate proteins are supplied, then gases exchange is taking place, then absorption of nutrition is taking place. Okay, then urine formation. For example, when the blood is flowing through a kidney, the urine is formed. Okay, so this is what see here is the amount of blood flow to the body per minute. Okay, see, the total volume is around 5000 ml of blood is present in an average adult. Okay, so for the brain alone it receives 750 ml, heart is receiving around 250 ml, but during the time of exercise it receives around 750 ml, the myocardium I mean. Okay, it can go up to, some literature say it is receiving even 900 ml also. Okay, some literature say it is receiving even 900 ml also. Then skeletal muscle will receive 1200 ml at rest. During exercise it will receive around 12500 ml per minute. Okay, then skin is receiving around 500 ml, but during exercise it receives around 1900 ml. Kidney is receiving 1100 ml, but during exercise the blood flow to the kidney reduces to 600 ml. Abdomen is receiving, that is the intestine is receiving around 1400 ml, but during exercise the blood is rerouted to the skeletal muscles here. Okay, that's why 600 ml is receiving the. So exercise will reduce blood flow to abdomen and kidney, whereas the skeletal muscles will receive more amount of blood. So what you have to understand here is, per minute 5800 ml of being is pumped by the heart. Okay, but during the exercise 17,500 ml, that is 17.5 liters of blood the heart can pump in a minute. Okay, for this, suppose when the heart is beating 72 times, it can pump 5.8 liters of blood per minute, whereas during the time of exercise like running or playing football or doing hard work something, or the athletes, you see some people they run 100 meters, 200 meters. Okay, during that time their heart is having the capacity to pump 17 liter of blood per minute. This is what you have to understand. So this is just a fist shaped organ. The heart is just a fist shaped organ. So that is the capacity of the heart. That's why I told you heart is very, very strong muscles. Heart is very, very strong muscle. Okay, now coming to the intrinsic and extrinsic control of this arterial or smooth muscles, as I told you, when the neural mechanism can control the blood vessel constriction, as well as the metabolic contents like hormones, then this oxygen, CO2, hydrogen, potassium. Okay, so all these things can control the blood vessel constriction and relaxation. Okay, so this is what you have to understand. Next, coming to blood flow to skeletal muscles, as I told you, there are red fibers, there are gray fibers, different types of skeletal muscles you would have studied. Okay, so in that, the red fibers, which is called as slow oxidative fibers, have more blood flow than the white fibers. Okay, so muscles at rest, for example, myogenic and neural mechanism predominate. Okay, so active hyperemia means increase of blood flow when the muscle becomes active. This is called as active hyperemia. So it increases because of the metabolic. For example, if I start to run, my thigh muscles need more amount of blood flow, then only it can contract and relax, okay, by the metabolic process, by producing ATP. Okay, so that process is called as active hyperemia. Okay, so for this, the sympathetic nervous system is also very essential to control the local metabolic control and have opposite effects on the arteriolar diameter. Okay, then coming to the blood flow to the brain, brain is a special type of tissue which is receiving around 900 ml of blood per minute. Okay, some literature says it is 750 ml, but some literature is telling around 900 ml of blood is flowing to the brain alone inside the cranium every single minute. Okay, so brain tissue, they are very special. They utilize more amount of energy. Okay, so the brain tissue is very sensitive to low pH and increase in carbon dioxide. Okay, that causes vasodilatation in the brain. Okay, then brain is vulnerable under extreme systemic pressure changes. If mean arterial pressure is below 60 millimeter of mercury, that is what, if the mean arterial pressure is going below 60 millimeter of mercury, that is hypotension, then the patient will experience syncope, that is fainting. Okay, so why when the patient walks in the sun they faint? Because suddenly what happens, there is vasodilatation and there is profuse sweating. So what happens, the blood pressure goes down and they faint. Okay, so any less blood flow to the brain, it causes fainting. Okay, so likewise, when the blood pressure is more than 160 millimeter of mercury, it can cause edema in the cerebral tissues. It can cause edema in the cerebral tissues. Okay, so coming to the blood flow through the skin, when you expose the skin to the sunlight, there is vasodilatation and more amount of blood flows to the skin. So people who are white, when you show your skin in the sunlight, it becomes red because it shows that there is more amount of blood flow that is present to the skin. Okay, then the skin, there is more amount of venous plexus and the neural adjustments of blood flow through arterioles and arteriovenous anastomosis. So the skin is also having sympathetic nerve endings and the thermoreceptors. Okay, so what happens, this is a place where the perfusion is taking place. This exchange of gas is taking place on the skin. Okay, where there is more amount of capillary beds. When you fall from in the road, slip and fall, and you scratch the skin, you can see small bleeding. Okay, bleeding spots, but that is due to damage of the capillaries that is present in the skin. Okay, then coming to blood flow to the lungs. Okay, the blood flow between the heart and lung, we call it as pulmonary circulation. So pulmonary circulation pressure is 24 by 10 millimeter of mercury. Okay, what, only the arteries are having high pressure. Okay, the arterial blood pressure is, normal arterial blood pressure is 120 by 80 millimeter of mercury, whereas the pulmonary circulation present, the pressure present in the pulmonary vessels is 24 by 10 millimeter of mercury. Okay, whereas the pressure present in the portal vein in the liver is 13 by 7 millimeter of mercury. Okay, these are all the small blood pressure that is present in the veins, whereas the main blood pressure is present in the arteries, which the normal range is 120 by 80 millimeter of mercury. 120 by 80 millimeter of mercury. Okay, so this is what you have to understand. Then autoregulatory mechanism is opposite of that of the most tissues. Low O2 level cause vasoconstriction, high level promotes vasodilatation, allows for proper oxygen loading in the lungs. Okay, then blood flow through the heart, as I told you, the heart muscle, it is consuming 80% of oxygen in the blood. Okay, for example, the skeletal muscles and the other tissues in the body will consume only, utilize only 20% of the oxygen molecule in the red blood cell, whereas the myocardium will utilize around all 80% of the oxygen molecule that is carried by the red blood cells. Okay, so during ventricular systole, the coronary vessel is compressed and myocardial blood flow ceases and stored myoglobin supplies sufficient oxygen. Okay, so what happens, the coronary blood vessel is getting filled only during the diastole, not during the systole. Okay, why this is very important? When a cardiac interventional cardiologist is sending a cardiac catheter and he is injecting the dye, he has to inject the dye when the heart is going for diastole. So that time the coronary blood vessel will fill and the dye will spread. Okay, so that's very important. So likewise, around 750 to 900 ml of blood is being supplied to the myocardium every minute. Okay, so coming to the slow blood flow capillaries promotes diffusion of nutrient and gases. In this objective, we will see about the exchange and bulk flow and explain the significance of each. Okay, so you have to know about the velocity, the speed of blood flow in the blood vessels, capillary exchange of respiratory gases, then fluid movement in the capillary beds, then bulk flow. Okay, so these are all the things you have to know. So in the blood vessels of the body, three important differences between systemic arteries and the veins. Okay, artery run deep, as I told you before, whereas veins are running superficially. Okay, veins are more interconnected. The brain and digestive system have unique venous drainage system. Okay, as I told you, the brain venous system is bidural venous sinus drainage system, whereas the digestive venous drainage system is by the inferior vena cava. Okay, the portal system, we call it as portal venous system. I will show you that and explain. Name and give the major arteries and veins of the systemic circulation. This is a little bit important. Okay, so pulmonary circulation, as I told you, this pulmonary circulation is circulation between the heart and the lungs. Okay, there are two lungs. This is the right lung and left lung, and the right heart is receiving the venous blood, that is deoxygenated blood, and the left heart is circulating the oxygenated blood. So what happens here? So from the systemic circulation to the SVC and the IVC, the blood comes to the right atrium. From right atrium it comes to the right ventricle. From right ventricle through the pulmonary pulmonary veins. Pulmonary arteries. Okay, arteries carry deoxygenated blood. So it goes to the right lung and the left lung. So this lung is a purification center. Okay, they take the carbon dioxide out from the RBC, and that RBC will pick the oxygen. So after picking, they come and join to this left atrium. From left atrium, the oxygenated blood comes to left ventricle. From left ventricle, the oxygenated blood goes to the aorta and goes to all parts of the body. Okay, so the connection between the heart and the lung is called as the pulmonary circulation. Okay, systemic circulation is nothing but the connection between the heart to all parts of the body. Okay, all parts of the body, in sense, you see, the aorta is a major blood vessel. Then from aorta it is dividing and going into the brains. Then it is coming down, descending thoracic aorta, and then abdominal. This is descending thoracic aorta that is supplying arterial blood to the lungs. Then it passes through the diaphragm, and then it becomes the abdominal aorta. Abdominal aorta supplies the abdominal intestine and all this place, and also to the limbs. Okay, so all this place, the gases exchange is taking place, and the venous blood is formed. This venous blood comes to the inferior vena cava. Okay, then this inferior vena cava comes and connects to the right atrium. Okay, likewise from the brain, the blood and the upper part of the body, the veins are formed and it is forming the main superior vena cava and it's coming to the right atrium. Okay, so this is how the systemic, that is the systemic circulation is connection between the heart and all parts of the body. Okay, then this is the flow chart. You can see the aorta and the major arteries. So you have to know the names of these arteries. Okay, if you trace the aorta here, this is the aorta is originating in the left ventricle, and then it is giving the first branch, that is the right and the left coronary artery that is supplying the myocardium. Then it takes the name ascending aorta, then arch of aorta and the descending aorta. In the arch of aorta, you have the blood vessel to the right side brachiocephalic, that is it is going to the head as well as to the upper limb. Then left, there is no left brachiocephalic, instead directly there is common carotid and the left subclavian vein. It is going to the upper limb, and both these vessels are going to the brain. Okay, head and neck. So coming to the descending thoracic aorta, it gives branches to the mediastinal organs, esophagus, lungs, pericardial region and also the intercostal space. So these are the descending thoracic aorta branches. Okay, then when it pierces the diaphragm, it gives takes the name as abdominal aorta. So in this abdominal aorta, you have the 3 paired branches and 3 unpaired branches. Paired branches are the inferior phrenic artery to the diaphragm, then renal artery, and then the testicular or ovarian artery. Okay, whereas unpaired branches are this celiac trunk, superior mesenteric artery and the inferior mesenteric artery. Okay, so these are unpaired branches. Then when it comes to the pelvis, it divides into common iliac artery and it goes to the right and the left lower limbs. Okay, these are all the major branches of aorta. You can see all the names of these arteries. Just you have to remember all these names. Okay, so if you want to really see the further branches, I will give you the videos of my lecture of a different lecture, so that if you are interested, you can learn from that. Okay, next, coming to the upper limb, as I told you, there is right common carotid and left common carotid. It is forming the circle of Willis. So circle of Willis is nothing but the arterial network that is present inside the cranium. The arterial network that is present inside the cranium, that is formed by the common carotid and the vertebral artery. Okay, the vertebral artery is going and joining the circle, as well as the common internal carotid is going and forming circle. In the circle, you have the anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery and the posterior cerebral artery. This is the posterior cerebral artery. Okay, this circle is supplying the blood to the brain. Okay, this is what we call it as circle of Willis. Okay, you can see under the base of the brain, the circle of Willis is present, and you can see all this anterior, middle and the posterior cerebral arteries. Okay, next, coming to the arteries of the upper limb, coming to the arteries of the lower limb. When this abdominal aorta, it bifurcates and then it is becoming the common iliac artery. This common iliac artery is changing into internal iliac and external iliac. Okay, so external iliac comes through the inguinal ring and takes the name as femoral artery. Okay, then femoral artery is further going down and taking the name as anterior tibial and posterior tibial, taking the name as popliteal artery in the knee, and then it is taking the name as anterior and posterior tibial arteries. Okay, so this anterior tibial artery is going all the way down to the foot, and the posterior tibial artery gives a branch that is called as common peroneal artery or the fibular artery. So this comes and forms anastomosis. Okay, this anterior tibial artery is forming the anastomosis with the posterior tibial artery here. So what happens when this artery is blocked? This artery will supply blood to this leg. When this artery is blocked, this artery will supply the blood supply to this leg. This is called as collateral circulation. When this artery is blocked here, then we have to remove the whole lower limb. Okay, that leads to gangrene. So whatever blood vessels you see, the same blood vessels are present in the name of the veins also. Okay, but instead of aorta, this major vein is taking the name as inferior vena cava. Okay, from the lower limb to major veins, and then it forms connects to the inferior vena cava. From the inferior vena cava, it goes to the right atrium. Okay, likewise from the head, the dural venous sinus will come from the intracranial region, and then in the upper limb you have the axillary veins and the subclavian veins. Okay, so the veins of the upper limb, there are superficial veins and deep veins. Okay, like radial artery, you have radial vein. Like ulnar artery and median artery, you have the ulnar vein and medial vein. Okay, so but apart from this, there are superficial veins which is running under the skin, and you access it for giving venipuncture. Okay, I will show you that. So see what you see here is, this is the deep vein and these are the superficial veins. So the superficial veins, the deep veins go adjacent to the arteries, where the superficial veins at one stage they go and join to the deep veins only. Okay, you have the basilic vein and cephalic vein and the median cubital vein here, which you do puncture for taking blood sample. Okay, so likewise in the leg you have the medial saphenous and the lateral saphenous. These saphenous veins goes and joins to the femoral vein at the femoral canal. Okay, so this is the superficial veins of the lower limb. These veins are prone for varicose vein if the valves inside the veins are damaged. Okay, the valves inside the veins are damaged. Okay, and here you can see the cubital fossa, and this is the median cubital vein where you can puncture and take the sample blood for laboratory testing. Okay, next, these are the superficial veins here. See, this is cephalic vein and this is a cubital vein. Okay, cubital vein, and this is a basilic vein. All these veins are interconnected. Okay, so this is what you have to understand about the blood vessels. And for still deeper knowledge, I will give you other links. So if you have time, you can read that and gain adequate knowledge. Okay.